This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Welcome all of you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation. We talk about philosophy, but also politics and values. With me as someone who firsthand experienced the real politics and political coup, Roman Joch, the director of Civic Institute. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Roman Joch, as I understand, you were in the center of this transition between communism and democracy in Czech Republic. Tell me a little bit about your past and what you have experienced in your own eyes.
Yes, I was exactly 18 years old in November 1989. I was a student of my last year of my secondary grammar school. In fact, growing up in Bratislava, Slovakia in those times. And then after the fall of communism, I came to Prague to study at my university in Prague and stayed in Prague. Well, those were intoxicating times. I don't expect to live them again during my lifetime. I was old enough to have an understanding of the old communist regime, grey, based on lies, nobody believed them. I remember my aunt living in Moravia in the eastern part of the Czech Republic. She was a normal woman living in a village without any higher education. She was a baker. And I remember from the mid-80s visiting her, and she just asked me, Roman, did you listen to President Ronald Reagan on Voice of America or Radio Free Europe? He told them truth. He exposed them how they were lying, meaning Soviets and other communist rulers. So people, normal people in Czechoslovakia did not believe anything from the official communist propaganda. And they believed Ronald Reagan, American president, much more than they believed their own statesmen.
I think that Czech Republic is one of the Soviet blocs, one of the most free, open mind when it comes to it. Much more, of course, than Ukraine, much more than Lithuania. Maybe because of the closeness to the border of the Western world. Maybe because so much less under the pressure of the Orthodox religion, which of course, unfortunately, brings also the political influence. Do you think? But
yes,
continue
I
with your
agree.
story.
I would mention three factors. First, the memories of the interwar period of the 20s, 30s, of democratic Czechoslovakia. Still, older people had good memories of those times. Secondly, you are right, people in the western part of Czech Republic were able to watch German or West German in those times television, and people in western part of Slovakia watched Austrian television. So there was a source of independent information. And last but not least, yes, both countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, have belonged to Western Christendom. Most were either Catholics or Protestants. And in Western Christendom, we have always had something like a tension between the church and the state. Unlike in Orthodox Christianity, especially in Russia, where the Orthodox Church has always been a servant or even a serf of Russian tsars. Tsars in the old regime of communist rulers, and now there are serfs of Putin.
Absolutely, we see it so vividly when this is the battle of religion as well, and of those different Orthodox churches which come outside and they rebel against the main Cerkev of Moscow. But it happens right now, and of course we go back to the times when Czechs were already dreaming about the freedom, but for example, farmers in Ukraine didn't even have passports at home and couldn't imagine any form of freedom. So this space makes a difference. So that's why Czech Republic is also this wonderful example where when the value of democracy was cherished, and the free thoughts came, for example, with such influences of Roger Scruton, and of course one of the main leaders, which is recognized all over the world, so Václav Havel.
Yes. Yes, Roger Scruton was the most prominent British professor who used to visit Czechoslovakia since 1979 till 1985, when he was discovered by communist secret police and expelled from the country. And he was allowed to come again only after the fall of communism. So he was quite influential, especially among dissidents. Second major influence were so-called dissidents, and those dissidents consisted of three groups: former reformed communists from the year 1968, the least influential; second, Christian dissidents, mostly Catholic, and few Protestants. Both in Czech Republic and even more in Slovakia. In Slovakia, the Christian dissidents were the most powerful opposition force. And in Czech society, which is more secular than Slovak one or Polish one, those were secular, let us say, liberal humanists like Václav Havel and some others. And Václav Havel was an undisputed leader, able to speak to all three groups. He was admired and respected by both former reformed communists, ex-communists, Christians, and secular liberal humanists.
So tell us, please, what was the source of his success? What he represented that all of those groups respected?
I was told by one of his former fellow colleagues, dissident, that when they had discussions, all of them were speaking, giving their reasons for their positions, arguing with each other. Václav Havel was silent, and after everybody has spoken, he summarized in the best and brilliant way arguments of all and putting them together in a fruitful synthesis. And that was the reason and the source of his charisma and his authority among other dissidents.
Amazing. So he actually wanted to unite more than divide.
Absolutely.
Which is a very European element that we very often very close to each other. Even give an example of Poles and Czechs, but there we find so many reasons to feel different, to find differences between each other, which on certain level is absurd. But that happens in Europe. And then when you have a unique person like Václav Havel, and who unites and is respected by so many, then this is a real source of political power.
Oh yes, he just after the fall of communism in let us say in the year 1990, he had an undisputed authority. He could become a dictator if he wished. But he did not wish that. He was never tempted, or maybe he was tempted, I don't know, but he never succumbed to any sign of temptation to misuse and exploit his almost unlimited authority. So we were really glad to have him, somebody uniting people and respecting constitutional limits on the power, and being quite honest man. He was not good at lying. He probably never lied, unlike many other normal, regular politicians. So he was good as a president. In our constitutional system, he would not be good prime minister because he was not cheeky or brutal enough, no. But as a president, a so-called philosopher king, he was perfect.
Philosopher king, that's a nice way to referring to him and to his... Have you ever met him personally?
Few times at conferences, but I don't think I have had a chance to speak him one-on-one. No, but I listened to him on many conferences. I saw him drinking beer in the Prague castle and so on.
But this is also something I think beautiful for Central Europe, that you have this, that the leader is not that far from the society. And it seems like he was pretty close to people.
Yes, that's the case with almost all politicians. We are a small country. I don't know what was the situation in the First Republic in the 20s, 30s. Probably then President Masaryk was more like a kingly figure. But our post-November 89 politicians are approachable.
But isn't it like the sort of the Soviet way of, for example, creating power, that we put it somewhere hidden, that is either this figure which appears only before the crowd and you never see him or in public. This, I think, is the case with the Soviet leaders, yes, which of course affected the region strongly, but it is a good result that Czechs and the Slovaks could overcome it.
Yes, yes, people would like to have a chat with our politicians, both presidents, prime ministers, ministers, so to have meetings in towns, on squares, and to ask them questions. People like that and are accustomed to that, and the imperial majesty of Putin has no chance in
exactly, the imperial majesty of Putin, somewhere there. But funny thing, still in Slavic tradition somewhere, but such a difference. I'm sorry to mention, but this is the sort of another way of life of Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, than of the Russians.
Yes. There was perhaps in the past something like a pan-Slavism or pan-Slavic ideas among some Czech intellectuals, but we were completely cured from them in 1968 when Soviet tanks came, suppressed
yes,
the little freedom we had or our fathers had, and now I would say 95% of Czechs have no illusions about Russia. We are completely different worlds. We Western Slavs, Poles, Czechs, Slovaks are completely different, and the Western Ukrainians
yes,
as well. We are completely different than the Russians.
I think that because of this conflict right now and war in Ukraine, it seems like this Ukrainian mentality is shifting more to the Western, let's say, approach, yes, when they see the brutality of Russian soldiers, which they never expected, and they actually never. They treated them as brothers. Very often they speak Russian on both sides, and then they realized in Kherson and all of those parts, then in occupied territories right now, that wow, this Russian imperialism is still so alive, and it is the main danger of other Slavic language nations.
Exactly, the slaughter in Bucha at the beginning of the Russian aggression, Russian invasion against Ukraine, that had poisoned relationship between Ukrainians and Russians for several generations.
Absolutely.
At the minimum 50 years, maybe 100 years. The healing, if there is any healing in the future, will take longer than the healing between Germany and France, for example. And many Ukrainians have visited other countries, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. They see how we live, and they would like to have the same. They would like to live like us, like normal, decent people, and not like serfs of Moscow's Tsar.
Yes, and eating potatoes just in favor because they are creating the empire.
Yeah.
Or very often even have this experience of hunger, which of course is also a Russian way of enslaving nations. But going back to your personal experience, what was this coup about? What was your personal political experience? What did you take part in?
Well, as I mentioned, I was 18 years old in November 89. That's my love affair with politics started in those times. Not only with politics like practical affair, but with political ideas, political philosophy. And then when I came to study to Prague, well, that was the center of intellectual, political activities. And I evolved slightly from classical liberal position, loving freedom. Of course, we loved freedom. I still do love freedom, towards more conservative political position, because I am still in favor of freedom, of course, personal, political freedom. But I have realized that in order to have a decent, stable, free society, there is a necessity for some personal, intellectual, and moral virtues on the side of the people, on the side of the citizenship. So combination of some moral standards and political freedom shifted me a little bit from classical liberal towards conservative position. So I describe myself, if I need to describe myself in one word, I would say conservative. In 3 words, classical liberal / conservative.
Which is a unique thing in Czech Republic right now, because it's very much secular liberal society. Like maybe in an opposition to everything what happened before in the past. But out of all of the, let's say, Slavic countries, I think the most secular.
Yes.
Where do you think it comes from?
The main reason is that Czech Hussite Protestantism did not survive 40 years of communism. So Catholics remained Catholics, most of them especially in Moravia in the eastern part. Then there was a milieu, a group of Catholic intellectuals, mostly converts, in Prague, in a very secular city, in a secular part of the Czech Republic. So it was something like an intellectual revolt against the wider society. So Catholics are now the most numerous religion or denomination in the Czech Republic.
Again, a smile of the history.
In the past, the most populous, the most numerous were Hussite Protestants, and now the Hussite Church or Evangelical Church has very few believers. They lost their faith during 40 years of communism. They were brave during Nazi occupation, yes, they resisted that, but they have not survived 40 years of communism. Why? I really don't know. So the main reason of Czech secularism is just that our Protestant fellow citizens, most of them lost their faith.
Very interesting, but also scary to look at, because after all, this was a sort of Czech identity in a way, that they followed this Protestant Christianity in the form of evangelism, Hussism. In those times, a combination of freedom and faith, and right now, with a very secular society, where, of course, which leads to destruction of the family. It is when destruction of the family leads to destruction of the nation. I do hope that it will stop somewhere.
I would say in Czech society, it's exactly 1/2 of all marriages end in divorce. 1/2 survive without divorce, but 1/2, almost exactly 1/2, 50% are going to be divorced. That's the statistics. Czechs are secular, so the huge majority of Czechs are in favor of some right to abortion for several weeks, not more, but they are against same-sex marriage. Even secular Czechs claim that the name marriage should be reserved for the union of one man, one woman. And of course, gay couples could cohabitate, could live together, could have another legal title like partnership or registered partnership, whatever. But the word marriage, still, even secular Czechs think and claim that the word marriage should be for man and woman.
Interesting.
It's very interesting.
Because
it's not based on faith, on religious faith. They don't have the faith. It's more based on, I would say, tradition or common sense.
Common sense, this is something. What would you think would be a common sense in the sphere, let's say, post-Soviet bloc of this intellectual traditions, which after all is also very, very strong, rich. Czech philosophers have wonderful tradition. What would be, let's say, Czech or common sense?
Quite similar to English, to British. I think that was the reason why Czechs so much admired Roger Scruton. He was no religious thinker. He was no deep metaphysician, nothing like that. He was more empirical, British, oriented, Edmund Burke tradition follower with common sense. From time to time, I joke that Polish conservatism is more religious, Hungarian conservatism is more nationalistic, Czech conservatism is more common sense conservatism, and Slovakia is a crossroad of all three. And yes, I would say that Czechs in this sense are closer to Brits, not religious so much, and less close to Bavarians, Poles, Slovaks, Hungarians, who are more religiously oriented.
Absolutely. When this, especially, in fact, the Catholic Church in Poland was the strongest during the communism time. The most alive, vivid, people, the passion, the real faith was very strong there, and of course, eventually symbolized in the figure of John Paul II. But right now, again, we are developing, evolving. It goes the other way. The church has a lot of problems. Mostly in being authentic, especially to young people. No idea where it goes. There are a lot of converts to evangelism right now, even in Poland. Churches unite certain people, but definitely this deep root of that there is freedom in church. The church is a place of freedom. This is definitely the approach of Polish conservatives, or even Poles among, altogether among common folks, that people who are not even the believers, they knew that some free speech can be found in churches, which even the people who, secretaries of ministers used to go to church anyway, just to listen to something there. So this is, I would say, the paradox of the post-Soviet blocs, and especially of Poland.
I have a theory that it has been caused in Poland by the partition of Poland. Poles living under three empires without a nation state, and the church, the Catholic Church, was the part of Polish freedom and identity. The only remaining one, because there was no Polish state. There were Tsarist Russia, Prussia, then Germany, and Austria. And church was the authentic island of freedom among Poles inside Polish nation.
Absolutely, the only one, and the only one uniting, as you are right. Even the rail wars were different. Again, the Galicia, so there was the most free one under the Austrian Empire. Maybe there is even still a small sentiment for Franz Josef. I think this is something which we share with the Czechs.
Czechs had an antipathy against Habsburgs for many years, but everything has changed. I remember exactly when. It was in 2016, the 100th anniversary of the death of Franz Josef, and there was something like outpouring of nostalgia, of realizing that, well, we were not so bad after all under them. If we compare that to German occupation during the World War II, or then Soviet occupation after World War II. Well, all old Austrian Habsburgs, they were mild and good people, in fact. So now the reputation of Habsburgs, especially of those two last emperors, Franz Josef and Charles I, is quite good and quite high now among the people, both the people and among intellectuals.
Interesting.
Yes, it's the most surprising political phenomenon during my lifetime. A complete reversal of Czech attitudes towards Habsburgs.
With this romanticized image, of course, of the Empress Elizabeth, called Sisi, I think.
Sisi, yes.
I think it's something which unites, again, some of Bavaria, Austria, part of Poland, that even the fact that those emperors, Franz Josef, he spoke Czech. I think he spoke a little bit Polish as well. He spoke Hungarian. Sisi spoke Hungarian. So they tried to understand and give this space of freedom for those cultures so to flourish, exist, and not be destroyed, even if they were part of the imperium. Something completely different than the approach of the Soviet bloc. I
either read or was told by somebody that the father of Saint John Paul II was an officer in the Austrian Imperial Army during the World War I. And after the war, when young Karol Wojtyła was born, his father gave him, and mother they gave him the name Karol, Charles, in honor and in memory of that last emperor, Charles I. Maybe.
I don't know that yet, but the first one is true. The last, I don't know, might be the case. Definitely, especially in Krakow, where Karol Wojtyła came from, this sentiment for Habsburgs were very strong. Still, when you enter some of the basement pubs or cafes, you can find the portrait of Franz Josef there, and it is treated with a nice smile. Oh, you're still here. Stay well, be welcome. Roman, thank you very much for sharing all of this with us and all of this perspective. And I do hope that you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation, liked it, and you see this a very interesting shift of power and a political sphere in this central and eastern countries from communism to the democratic system. And I would like to also thank Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible. This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation.